Welcome to HortTube. My name is Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday. I'm actually in Dallas, Texas right this minute. I'm shooting a follow-up video for a design video that I did here in Dallas. That video should be up tomorrow as you're watching this. That's what my plan is. That was only like 6 or 7 or 8 weeks ago that I was over here at Nicole and Richard's house and laid this out because I was here, here for a meeting in Dallas, and I came over here and laid it out with the drone. If you haven't seen that video, very quickly they came back in here and have differentiated everything, mulched, put in tons of plants. They've been all over this project since I was just, it was just 7 or 8 weeks ago when I was here, but I'm here again. I was coming back through from the West Coast. Next week's Q&A will be in the garden at the house, and you'll see some garden update videos here from the house, hopefully before the end of this week. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone, because that's coming up this week as well. Again, through the rest of November and all of December, the weekly garden planner, the Learn to Garden video series are both $50 off, and they're over on the HortTube with Putnam website. The codes are down below the video to get the $50 off, and right here on the screen as well. And also t-shirts are 10% off through the entire month of December. So you got the entire month of December to take advantage of those 3 things being on sale that are all over on the HortTube.com website. Let's see, and again, we're getting back to the garden this coming week, and there'll be a follow-up video. A couple of these design videos, I don't really have the option of going back and following up. I did one in Denver, just designing, how I might go about designing that garden in Denver. Hopefully someday we'll get back over there and follow up on that one, but this one's a rare opportunity. Just like 6-7 weeks later, big impact's been made. So again, that video should be up tomorrow. So let's jump into some questions, some gardening questions from last week. Somebody asked strategies for helping shrubs, trees, roses, whatever, with extreme day-night temperature change, and then crazy winter really quickly. So one of the things was about fertilizer. You definitely don't want to be fertilizing this time of year. We definitely want things to shut down. These are the types of things that are in a weekly garden planner too, where I talk about not fertilizing certain times of the year. There's another weekly garden planner question coming up, but these are the kinds of things that are in the weekly garden planner. But I definitely don't want to be fertilizing. There might be tiny amounts of pruning that I would do this time of year, but not a whole lot. Most all of my pruning is going to be done in the late winter or after spring flowering for spring flowering things, early spring flowering things. So got to kind of know what plants you have, is to know when the best time to prune them on that side of winter is, but definitely not on this side of winter. That pruning and fertilizing could stimulate some growth potentially, that could exacerbate the fact that winter is going to slam them, because we really haven't had a fall. We've been on the road for a while, but I'm following the temperatures here on the on the West Coast or on the East Coast, and we just haven't had any kind of real cold. So is there the possibility that we could go right to 15 degrees and barely had a frost? That's a possibility on any given year. Most of your roses, deciduous plants, deciduous trees, most of those things are going to take it pretty well without having any kinds of issues. It's more typically the leafy evergreen things that struggle with this, not having the temperature moderate down. And so if you have any newly planted leafy evergreen things, like let's say you put in camellias this fall or azaleas or anything that's potentially cold sensitive in your area or at upcoming temperatures, those are things you might want to cover with a sheet. Water well if they're in containers before before the cold comes. Be prepared to protect those things from what we want in the fall is for the nighttime temperatures go to 50s and then 40s and then 30s and then 20s and then in the teens if it gets that cold in your area, or even single digits or negatives or whatever. But you'd love that step down, right? Unfortunately, we're not afforded that very often normally. We just have some sort of fall that just keeps on going. Boy, it was beautiful out today here in Dallas. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And then wham, sometime around Christmas into that first couple weeks of January. So be prepared to cover those leafy evergreen things. Again, most of the things like roses can handle those kind of getting hit over the head kind of things. It's almost like a free pruning on some of those things. But the marginal leafy evergreens, be prepared to cover. Okay, there you go. Somebody asked the dates for the open garden next year. I don't know, but it'll be sometime in early June. we should have some sort of announcement in the next few weeks about the a slight expansion of the garden there in Raleigh as well. And so that for any of you who came to the garden last year, it should be very different this next year. And also, I will be limiting it with tickets somehow. It won't be an expensive thing, and it may be a fundraiser for something, but what I'll do is put some small dollar amount and then have it ticketed so we know how many people are coming. I think we had 800 people in 2 days, and the only reason it was that few, I think, was because it was in the mid and upper 90s. Come here, Holly. Holly's back here in the garden. I'm sure she'll walk through here at some point. But the only reason I think it was limited to 800. So we'll probably put some sort of cap on the number of people, but I'll announce this in the Sunday videos. So in the question and answer videos, when those tickets go up, and you just need one to come. Just that way, it's just such a small lot that they're really, if we'd had, there she is. Here she is. She gets to enjoy Nicole and Richard's back garden here in Dallas. Let's see. But I can't have more than that. That was like the maximum number of it being comfortable. So anyway, we'll announce that coming up. And again, I'm going to do it as some sort of fundraiser, not trying to make it some profit center for getting you guys to come and look at the plants in the garden. But we'll see. So somebody said they planted osmanthus 4 feet apart, then read they should be 6 feet apart. What are the ramifications? Does this matter? It won't matter for a long, long time, but at some point, obviously it matters, you know, how close plants are planted together. If you go to the recommended spacing though, sometimes, let's say it's 6 or 8 or 10 feet or whatever, it takes forever to fill that wall in. So it might be, you know, that you can plant things almost half the distance and then cut every other one out in the future. You know, that would be some possibility that you could do. 4 feet's probably fine. It obviously will require potentially more water. You know, right? They're closer together, each of them using their own water, but it should fill the wall in quicker. And before this becomes an issue, see, if they're like osmanthus fragrance, the trunks can get gigantic on them. So there is some sort of point in the future where you won't probably be able to easily cut every other one of them out, but you could potentially do that. But before this is a problem, it's going to be years and years and years and years. And if you have to do the math on how long you're going to be in the house, I mean, I tell people that sometimes. I mean, how long are you going to be there? It may be somebody else's problem. Shh, don't tell anybody I said that. But sometimes that's the case. You don't want to wait for the entire 20 years you're in this house or 10 years that you plan on being in this house before you move back to your wherever and never have the screen fully fill in. Holly, come on, come on. We're not going to eat grass. We're not going to eat this grass. We don't need to eat any grass. You had a perfectly good breakfast, and you've had plenty of water. You don't need to eat their grass. You don't need it. We don't need to do that. We don't need it. Okay. All right. She's on all soft food diet that she is absolutely in love with right now. So we're trying to put some weight back on her. Despite best effort, she's getting thinner. No matter how we adjust, it seems like, you know, she's that age. She's getting to that age, right? Okay. Somebody said best time to plant marginal plants like camellias on Long Island. Definitely in the early spring. I mean, that would be the best time. If you've already purchased the camellias, they're better off in the ground than they are in the container, unless you have a garage space you can protect them on nights that the pots would freeze solid. So I think I summed that up pretty well. So they need to be outside. If you're in a container though, they need to come inside on the coldest nights that could freeze it solid. It won't be a whole lot of nights on Long Island because parts of Long Island are zone 8A. If you hadn't purchased plants yet that were marginal in Long Island, I would spring plant them just because, I mean, if I look, you know, I do consultation work and I do the occasional Long Island consultation, and there's no leafy evergreens in the background. If we do a winter consultation, almost everything loses its leaves. Everything goes completely dormant during the winter. There's not a lot of leafy evergreens there. Despite the fact that it's still zone 8A and they can be hardy there, the shorter days have some impact. You know, you have shorter days in the wintertime than we do down in Raleigh. And so if you have a temperature, let's say we have the same average low temperature of 10 degrees. that night that it gets to be 10 degrees, you're gonna be there longer than I am because your sun's gonna go down whatever amount of time earlier and come up later in the morning. So keep in mind, you're gonna get more hours at those temperatures the further north you are, even though our average low temperature is the same. I hope that makes sense. But you'll see less leafy evergreens going north, despite the fact that the temperature, the average low temperature may not be dropping all that much. Okay, so spring plant them if you haven't purchased them. If you have purchased them, they'd be better off in the ground unless you have the ability to protect them in the coldest nights that the pots could freeze solid. Okay, are there non-variegated Carex, solid green or dwarf ones? There are tons of Carexes. You can go on like Plant Delight's website and others and find all kinds of interesting Carexes. In terms of a dwarf solid green one, Carex pennsylvanica is used in landscapes all over the place. It's a native one. Pennsylvanica is a good clue that it's a native one. But there's 3,000 species of Carex. They're pretty much all non-variegated in the wild. These are the variegated ones, and the stripy ones are mostly just selections that humans have made. They've observed them in the wild or in containers of green ones or whatever, and then produced them that way. But there are tons of Carex, and it's so weird because I was talking to somebody not that long ago that had no Carex on their list in their nursery 20 or 30 years ago, and now they have more Carexes than they have grasses. It's kind of interesting, but yes, there's lots of them. But Carex pennsylvanica is one I see used quite a bit. Let's see. So somebody said plant sales, big time plant sales this time of year. Can boxwoods, Clayera, etc. be healed into a raised bed for winter, or is it better to store them in the ground? I'm guessing they're asking if they want to leave them in the container and then heal them in together. You could absolutely do that. Make sure the drainage hole is going to work properly though. When you sink a container in the ground, you could be plugging up that drainage hole at the bottom, so it needs to drain underneath it. Boxwoods are so cold hardy that you're probably not going to have an issue with boxwoods, but Clayera, I don't know where the person, 7B Knoxville. So that Clayera, which is zone 7 hardy, could be tender in the container above the ground for sure in Knoxville during the wintertime. So, but you can just put them all together and then just pile leaves up around the pots all around them, or mulch or something like that. And then when any really cold's coming, you could throw a sheet over them if you were concerned for that night, or bury it the rest of the way in leaves and then get them off after the coldest part of that has passed. So you have some options other than having to dig holes to do this. Let's see. Somebody wants tall, narrow recommendations for evergreen in front of a new RV garage in 8A, Georgia. And then a question mark sky pencil hollies. They're concerned about the increasing dry conditions. Yeah, sky pencil hollies, and I've said that in the sky pencil videos I've made in the past, can be kind of wimpy if you're not keep continuing to water in the future, even after it appears that they're rooted in and they've anchored themselves in. Even in the future, if any extended dry period comes, they can be vulnerable to dying or to thinning drastically. They don't let you know that they're going to thin drastically before they do it. That red sky pencil holly, I may have said this just a few weeks ago, I think is going to be, Dr. Reuter's breeding was for some increased hardiness in Ilex crenatas or Japanese hollies. So maybe, maybe try that red sky holly. And then of course there's things like Taylor's junipers and other narrow conifers that may fit in there fine. If it's a space that stays kind of semi-arid, and gets a little bit of air movement, you could consider using Italian cypress. Blue point juniper be another one that you could use. There are some narrow upright conifer options that you could definitely use. You could even consider using one of the upright narrow boxwoods. That might be an option as well, like that. The better boxwood, the Skylight. Skylight's the one that you could probably make easily tall and narrow, and that may be a better solution than the Ilex crenatas. Thoughts on Joro spiders. So I had not seen them in gardens. I know they're in like North Georgia and South Carolina. They're even in North Carolina, but I haven't seen them in our area yet. It looks like a little yellow riding spider, but they build these intensive web communities. They don't seem to mind that there's another Joro spider like you know, 6 feet away hunting as well. They were imported, of course, in freight. You know, everything moving around the globe right now. We're, you know, despite us knowing now that we shouldn't be taking soil and insects and trees and shrubs and everything around the world without first going through steps, things are still coming in freight, and these spiders apparently came in freight, taking them about 10, 12, 15 years to really spread all over the place. Ram and Tom Giberson's garden is just absolutely full of them. I mean, it's wild. It's just crazy amounts of webbing all over the place from these spiders. I think they're poisonous, but like mildly poisonous. I think I read somewhere that somebody was like kind of excited to have them because they were going to take care of all the bad insects that were in the garden. Well, they're also going to take care of the good insects in the garden too, probably. This is a voracious feeder. Holly's laid down in the mulch over here. She finally settled in the shade. I don't know what to do about them. You know, they're just, I'm hoping something comes along and balances that out. Right now, we just don't have a predator for them. You know, when something new comes along like that, it's able just to go absolutely bonkers. You know, eventually maybe some bird or something will look at them as food, or I have no idea. But my thoughts on them are they're creepy, for sure. I couldn't believe it at Rams. That was year over year going to her garden where there were none, and then the next year, walking around the garden in the morning is like this, you know, how it is walking through spider webs. It was not particularly fun. So I don't know what to do about them. For me, I would probably be tearing those webs down and just annoying them as much as I possibly could. So I don't want to, it's easy to say they're going to take care of bad insects, but they're also going to take care of good insects and pollinators and other things that I'm inviting into the garden as well. So kind of creepy. Somebody said looking for zone 8 shrubs for pH over 7 in North Texas. On the single plant videos that I've been putting up, there is an alkaline, tolerant playlist for zone 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So far, again, you can see how many of these single plant videos I'm putting up right now. It's going to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plants over the next year. And that playlist will continue to fill out. I think there's only like 2 or 3 things in it now. The boxwoods are definitely in it. But you can go to the Zone 8 alkaline tolerant playlist. Right now, again, I think it's going to have like 3 plants in it. But over the next year, any plant that's alkaline tolerant in the single plant videos will end up in there. And so I'm hoping I'm hoping to build these libraries for people who have specific issues. You know, there's a dry shade playlist for Zone 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Again, there's probably only 2 plants in it at this point because I just started this, but we're going to develop this really quickly. And so hopefully in the future, you need plants for dry shade for Zone 8. You go to that playlist. Hopefully there's 30, 40, 50 things in there a couple of years from now. So I'm working on that. Somebody asked about the format for the weekly garden planner. Is it video based? Yes, but there'll be, so every month is broken down into weeks. Hence weekly garden planner. And then each week I wrote a brief description of what that video is. So I think every month probably has on average about 30 to 40 videos. So it's quite a lot of videos. This first lap through the year, we just went with this video-based content. Next year, we're gonna start to fill in with more specific plant-related questions like, you know, things to prune after flowering, things to prune before flowering, those kinds of things. I'm going to start developing those lists. So it's going to be written and video content, and we'll add some videos in of things that we're obviously missing. I think as we come back around to March and April and May, we'll find we're doing things in the garden that we didn't have on the weekly garden planner, and we're going to continue to add to it. Once you bought it, you own it, so you don't have to buy it again, or there's no future updates like where you have to buy it again or whatever. But that's how it is. Now, in that video, they ask, i.e. when to cut back butterfly bushes. That's a video that's on there that's included in some of the late cutback videos, but I want it in list form as well in the future. So again, we'll be continuing to work on that. December is not up yet, but it's been shot. I hope that by the end of this week, all of December will be up, and we're filming January and February as soon as we get home. And that completes the year. for the base, where we were just trying to lay out the base for it, and then we're adding things in. It's the same thing on the Learn to Garden video series. I've got a base of videos from designing to mulching to paths to picking plants to plant shopping and all kinds of things to teach in the Learn to Garden video series. There's some missing things from it, and I have that list. It will continue to add videos to it as well. There you go. I'd love a video on how you use your notebook. Do you catalog info into it? We have all of these notebooks that we've ever filled out for the question and answers I have. I don't know what I'm doing with them. I mean, I've answered the questions in the videos, but I do have them. It's a good reference probably for me to go back and, you know, I could probably do a 20 most asked questions in the history of, you know, the question and answer video, right? I could do that pretty easily. I ultimately don't know what I'm doing with them, but I have kept them all, you know, over the years. Okay, let's see, that was 14. We're cruising through this today. Somebody has a 2-year-old Kaleidoscopobilia. Not much bloom and no changing color so far. Is it a maturity issue? Yeah, probably. One thing about the variegated abelias is, I mean, like our Radiance blooms and our Miss Lemon blooms, the blooms don't show up all that well on the variegated ones because the variegation kind of blends in with the white flowers on them or the maybe pale pink flowers on them. So there's pollinators on them and they're blooming, but definitely the green varieties of Abelia, the flowers are more floriferous. You know, they're more flowery. Let's call it that. So I don't know that, I don't know if you're ever going to look at it and go, wow, that's a great flowering plant, you know, on one of the variegated ones. In terms of it changing color in the winter time, yeah, it could still be its, you know, maturity. And it's not that cold yet. So this winter is not a good, I don't think it's a very good fall to talk about what fall color you've seen on your leafy evergreens that turn colors in the winter time. It's probably just not there yet. So you may see more of that orangey color show up as December and January come on here. When will we start filming from the new site in Wallace at the nursery space? I was talking to David Johnson from Johnson Nursery the other day. We had a phone conversation a week or two ago, and I was telling him it's probably going to be in February, January, February. I'm just letting that place mature, letting that those wood chips were giant root pieces, and it's going to take a while for them to break down, and I don't think they're going to break down completely even in a year or more. They're basically going to become partly mulch, but it having covered the ground for this amount of time will have improved that soil drastically and the water holding capacity of that soil drastically. So we'll have improved the soil. More chipped up, just plain wood chips would have been better, and probably would have advanced us being able to start over there a little bit sooner. Doesn't matter. We've got a group of magnolias that we got from a visit down in South Carolina and a video from a few months back. If you watch that video, we've got some magnolias that are going to go in that site and some other interesting things already. And so sometime in February, likely, I probably wouldn't plant, you know, some of the leafy evergreen things I have going in there. I'll probably be, a couple of them are one of a kind. I probably will be thinking about waiting until April so they don't get hurt in some way. But anyway, yes, things will start to go in there this spring. And again, we have an expansion in the Raleigh garden coming as well. What is the watering schedule for tropicals you're trying to overwinter inside, i.e. Mandevilla and Angelonia? So Angelonia we think of as an annual outside, but they're actually woody perennials. This is true of a lot of annuals that we have. Pepper plants are actually perennials, but it gets cold enough to kill them when we leave them outside. But we could bring them into a greenhouse and keep the same pepper plant year over year over year because they do become woody. You'll notice that you can really see that toward the end of the season. You can go to the bottom of any annuals you have in your garden and seeing if they're getting woody stems down near the bottom. They're probably more likely actually perennials. They're just not cold tolerant perennials. So they're tropical perennials. And your area just gets cold enough or wet enough or something to kill them during the winter time. So that, where the heck was I going with that, Jim? So anyway, I got off track on the Angelonia being a perennial. So if you're hearing that and then going, that's an annual. Well, you could save them and bring them in the house. Really, it's about letting these things become slightly dry before you're watering them. And I don't know. It depends on We keep our house pretty cool during the winter time. I love the house. I sleep much better when it's cool inside, so I don't run my heat very much. The more you run your heat, or even the type of heat, like if you have gas heat versus heat pump heat, the gas can be drier, and it's going to be room to room, house to house, space to space on how long it's going to take, and the soil type you've used, when they were planted, how root bound they got before you brought them into the house. A lot of factors are going to factor into how these things are going, when they're going to need watering. But make sure you're just letting them become slightly dry before you water them. You can get, some sort of tester. You can get a moisture meter to put down in the container that will tell you this. If you're worried about it, just grab one off of Amazon. I should have one linked in the Amazon store down below my all the videos. But there's that, or again, just finger check. Some of them, and they're going to be on different timing. It's not like I can say, hey, all of your houseplants are going to need to be watered every 5th day. That's not going to work either. There's going to be something like cactus and other things blended into it that you're going to have to virtually not water the entire winter, just because they're going to be low light, not growing. You're hopefully not pushing them with fertilizer. Another thing that's in the weekly garden planner about bringing your house, transitioning plants in the house. But again, as long as you're not pushing them, they're not going to need a whole lot, and you need to individually check them. Okay, best way to plant ericaceous plants, in this case blueberries. So ericaceous plants, and you can look this up, there's a group of like pieris and azaleas and rhododendrons and blueberries, and a lot of plants that developed in very low pH soils that are, a lot of it's a little bit heavy organic material soils as well, peat bogs and that kind of thing, where blueberries evolved, and a lot of those plants evolved. They tend to have really fibrous, shallow root systems on all of them. And there's quite a few of these types of plants that we use in ornamental horticulture. This person, their soil's not acidic enough, and it's not ideal conditions. They're planning for having blueberries alone. They want strategies for removing the compacted clay and using it as a natural pot. Adding ericaceous compost and some native clay soil, and top off with soil and mulch and fertilize with ericaceous fertilizer yearly. Is this an okay strategy? Your strategy should be to go and buy some fruit plants that would fit a more neutral soil, and then go buy blueberries by the pint for much less money than this is going to cost you. So I laugh about this, but I have been more and more talking about designing our gardens and working with what we have a little bit more. I do have a series of videos on the channel about blueberries, about adding, potentially using peat moss or any kind of ericaceous potting soil that may be pine bark or something like that. Using them in containers. It might actually be almost easier to grow them in containers than, to go through this entire thing. But I mean, the quickest way to lower the pH in your soil is sulfur, but it's temporary, that'll always bounce back. So you've got to be constantly monitoring it to do that. Yeah, I wrote this down just because this is a long list of things to say that I can grow blueberries in my garden, and it's going to have to be readdressed all the time. And even if you get this 90% right, it may still not produce blueberries like you want them to produce. I don't know how close to neutral. It says not acidic enough, and so I don't know what your pH is. If your pH is below 6.5, I would plant a couple blueberries out there, maybe add a little bit of pine bark soil conditioner or whatever, this ericaceous compost to it, and see how those one or two plants perform before you go all in on this strategy. If it's below 6.5, you may get enough iron anyway. So again, I don't know what not acidic enough means. If not acidic means 7.5 and it's actually alkaline, then that's probably no good. But if it's 6.5 or lower, you probably can get away with minor modifications. That's what I'll say. Okay, somebody's in Milton, Florida, and their gladiolas are budding up to bloom. Is this normal? Will this kill them? It definitely won't kill them, but it's not probably normal behavior. It said zone, I think it was zone 8. So gladiolas typically, in that far south, you can plant the corms bulb-like things, corms in November, December, and they'll bloom, you know, that spring into maybe early summer for you. We plant them typically a little bit later, than that. And they will, depending on where you are, the ups and downs of the summer, you know, how hot the summer is, will repeat bloom occasionally. There may have been some sort of trigger that the plant read as dormancy, which could have been heat stress as much as cold stress. And so now it's growing and trying to bloom again. It won't kill them, but it is, again, there's lots of these oddities going on out there in the world. What is the difference between Romeo and Juliet Clara? Not a lot. They're, the variegation is opposite on the two of them, and you'll notice on Romeo it has much more broader yellow variegation in it, and then Juliet has a little bit more of that pink variegation in them. My experience thus far has been Juliet grows a little bit quicker if you're interested in using it as a small screening plant or something. If you wanted to put one in a container, or stay really small in a foundation or something, and keep it easily kept smaller, Romeo might be the one to use. But there, I know that Romeo was just a chance variegation on some that were in a nursery down in Florida, and on another Clara japonica, which are Clara something else now. They're not Clara japonica anymore, but they're both the same. It's just it's a different variegation on them. And again, I've noticed that Juliet is a little bit quicker in the ground. That may not be the case for everybody. I say something like that. This is the type of thing, though, in gardening where somebody will say something is hard to move because it died for them, and now everyone says it's hard to move. It may be that your Romeo grows faster than Juliet, but Jim has now locked in place that Juliet's a faster growing plant by saying it in a video like this. Let's see. Okay, is this the last question? No, I got two more. Somebody has Gardenia in 6.7 to 6.8 pH. They added acidifier because they like acid, but leaves are turning yellow. Do I need to keep adding acidifier, or is it planting shock? Okay, two things. Number one, I would never add it again unless you've tested the pH, and you can get a cheap pH tester on Amazon, again, and probably in my Amazon store down below this. So don't keep adding something, you know, without, you know, if we are gonna go down the manipulate the soil thing, after you've done one round, you can wait about 6 or 9 months or something and then test it before you start adding again. And number two, if the yellow leaves are on the inside of the plant, that's pretty normal interior thinning that gardenias get. They can get it when they're too dry, and they also get it when they're budding up to bloom in the spring and early summer. You'll see some yellow leaves on them. If there's a lot at one time, usually that means it got dry at some point. I'm careful when I say this, though, because it doesn't mean it's dry today. But sometime in the last few months, it got drier than it wanted, and it thinned quite a bit down at the bottom. If it's yellow in the new growth, that would be more of an indication of iron deficiency, okay, where you see the veins in the leaves are darker than the rest of the leaf. So if it's in the new growth, it's a soil acidifier issue. But if it's in the old growth, it got dry at some point. Doesn't mean go drown it, just means go check it. Okay, last question for this week. Somebody in the Spider's Web Fatsia video, they have one doing okay. Seems to be doing well in zone 6B through sun, cold, wind with protection and drought, and they were excited about that. Don't ever let your guard down in zone 6B on that Spider's Web Fatsia. I think that you're just, you know, we haven't had, I mean, we got moved from zone 7B to 8A in Raleigh, but I bet we've actually been zone 9 out of the last 10 years. So we haven't had even a zone 8A winter, except for maybe one during that period of time. This is a moving average of 30 years of data, and the newer data is much warmer than the older data. So it's actually being weighted down a bit by some old data. So it's, but you're gonna get a 6B temperature at some point, and it's going to be potentially damaging to that Spider's Web Fatsia. So be prepared to cover it even after it's well established in the future. I just probably don't think you've had a real 6B winter since it went in the ground. And then, the question was, would it work in dry, full shade on the north side of the house? Well, that's going to be colder on the north side of the house, potentially with the north wind hitting it. And they do tend to like moist, well-drained conditions and not super, super dry conditions. Although there's a couple on a retaining wall at NC State, but they're, you know, 8 by 8, and they're well established. They're probably rooted way down into that raised wall at this point. And there's somebody else that had said something about they had never seen them bloom, but I somehow have skipped that along the way here. And they do bloom. Sometimes on some of these ornamental plants that we get, it can take years for them to bloom in the ground. I probably didn't know that that the variegated osmanthus, the what's the Goshiki osmanthus. I probably didn't know that Goshiki osmanthus and bloomed until I was growing it for like 10 years. And then I went into the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. There's one 6 foot tall there. It was white flowers from top to bottom. And I'd been growing them for years in containers in the nursery, but under high fertilization, pushing them, watering them, really giving them almost too much. They were growing at the expense of flowers. Given a little resistance in the ground, thing flowers like crazy. So there's sometimes as things settle in, as they mature, as you less baby them a little bit, they may be more apt to flower. So again, thank you guys so much. Ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video, and I'll pick from those next week. Also, again, thank you to those who have purchased the weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series. Those of you who haven't, they're $50 off. The links are down below the video, and the t-shirts are all, which we have, I should be wearing one right now. There are 7 different ones over on the website, and they're all 10% off, and the code is there as well. So thank you guys so much for watching.